Hey Planeswalkers, this is Eric from Bane Alley Magic, bringing you another modern deck tech video. Today's deck is something I call Savage Obliteration. But before we get into that, a quick reminder. If you like this video and you hit that like button or that subscribe button, it would rule. So, our namesake card is Phyrexian Obliterator, which is a 5/5 horror for 4 black mana. It has trample, and it says whenever a source deals damage to Phyrexian Obliterator, that source's controller sacrifices that many permanents. Behold, blessed perfection, Shieldred Whispering One. This is one of my favorite cards in Magic, not only because the effect is so cool and unique, but also because I love the film series Aliens. And I love the artist who originally designed the alien, H.R. Giger. Not only did Giger design the alien for the film, he is also a pioneer of the art style known as biomechanical. So if you haven't already, I strongly suggest you check out his art. You will be blown away. And the artwork for Phyrexian Obliterator is obviously a nod to H.R. Giger, and I think that is awesome. It has seen play in mono-black devotion decks, but I feel like those decks get beaten out too easily by control decks and removal. I've always wanted to build a deck that really synergizes with the Obliterator more than just working with its devotion to black. And one day, it came to me. Force our opponents to deal the Obliterator damage. But how can we do that? Well, let's start with our other namesake card, Savage Summoning. It's 1 green for an instant. It says Savage Summoning can't be countered. The next creature card you cast this turn can be cast as though it had flash. That spell can't be countered. That creature enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So, what we're basically doing here is planning on, our opponent attacking us with some huge creature, and then we flash in Phyrexian Obliterator with Savage Summoning, and we block with Phyrexian Obliterator, and we're basically gonna, force our opponents to sacrifice, what is hopefully a ton of permanents. So, super powerful. Basically, get ready, folks. Total Obliteration is at hand. Its instant speed and counterspells will make no difference. And if we don't have Savage Summoning, once we have the Obliterator on the battlefield, we also got 4 copies of Titanic Brawl, which is 1 and a green for an instant. This spell costs 1 less to cast if it targets a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. So if you got Savage Summoning and you cast Phyrexian Obliterator, which will have a +1/+1 counter, this will just be 1 green mana. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. So that's awesome. Once he's on the battlefield, you can just have him fight anybody you want and force that creature to deal him damage. And you can of course even do this in response to someone trying to destroy the Obliterator with removal, or even exile the Obliterator with removal. You can respond with instants like Titanic Brawl, which is super cool. Alright, and so we got 4 Titanic Brawl, 4 Savage Summoning, 4 Phyrexian Obliterator, and next we have 4 Chord of Calling, which is X green 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 for an instant with Convoke, which means your creatures can help you cast this spell. Each creature you tap while casting the spell pays for 1 colorless mana or for 1 mana of that creature's color. And Chord of Calling says, search your library for a creature card with CMC X or less and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So, just like Savage Summoning, Chord of Calling, it not only searches Phyrexian Obliterator, but puts it onto the battlefield at instant speed, hopefully tricking our opponent into attacking into it, so we can block with it and make them sacrifice a bunch of permanents. There's only 4 copies of Phyrexian Obliterator. It's a really unique card, so it's great that we have Chord of Calling as sort of a backup Phyrexian Obliterator, right? And we also have Hornet's Nest, which is similar to the Obliterator. It's 2 and a green for a 0/2 insect with Defender, and it says whenever Hornet Nest is dealt damage, put that many 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch onto the battlefield. So, if we get out Hornet's Nest with either Chord of Calling or Savage Summoning, then we can force our opponent to give us a small army of uh, hornets, flying death touch insects. And, if we have another Chord of Calling, we can use those hornets to, convoke out Phyrexian Obliterator. Pretty awesome. Next, we have Fertile Ground, which is an enchantment aura for 1 and a green. And it says, whenever enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 mana of any color to his or her mana pool. Well, yeah, when you saw Phyrexian Obliterator and Chord of Calling, you probably figured, hey, what's going on here? These both have very specific mana costs, 4 black and 3 green over there. And to fix this problem, we need ramp. We have plenty of ramp in the deck, but I looked at the artifacts that are CMC2, and they didn't really work. Like, if you think of Golgari Signet, I think it is, the Signet, just 2 mana, pay 1, and tap it to make both green and a black. Well, the problem there is it kind of forces one of your mana to be green, so it doesn't work well with Phyrexian Obliterator. And same thing with, like, Chord of Calling, it forces one of your mana to be black, right? So, something like Fertile Ground is actually really great for only 2 mana. Enchanted Land taps to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. And so, unlike a lot of those artifacts that are going to enter tapped, they're only going to add colorless mana to our mana pool. This is a really good option. Unfortunately, we're not running enough forests to put Utopia Sprawl in the deck because, obviously we want to have all of our mana able to generate black mana to cast Phyrexian Obliterator. So we're not running many forests in the deck. But yeah, what's really cool is we got Fertile Ground. It's only 2 mana, and yeah, that is great ramp when you compare it to any of the artifacts in the same converted mana cost range. Absolutely. Alright, so next we got our other ramp spells, 4 copies of Elves of Deep Shadow and 4 copies of Birds of Paradise. So Elves of Deep Shadow, 1 green for a 1/1 Elf Druid, taps to add a black, and it deals 1 damage to you. So that's really sweet in this deck. We want to get that black mana as soon as possible. Birds of Paradise, just a staple for any deck that needs to ramp. 0/1 Flying Bird, taps to add 1 mana of any color. Obviously we're going to be using it to add black for Phyrexian Obliterator, most likely. Next we have our early game removal and control. So we got 4 copies of Fatal Push, 1 black for an instant, destroy target creature if it has CMC 2 or less, and it has Revolt, destroy that creature if it has converted mana cost 4 or less, instead if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn. Thoughtseize is 1 black for a sorcery, target player reveals his or her hand, you choose a non-land card from it, that player discards that card, you lose 2 life. So these are just great for early game removal, and what's really great with Fatal Push and Phyrexian Obliterator is we don't mind that their big creatures are sticking around, because those are the exact creatures we want to stick around, so that they'll have to sacrifice more permanents when they accidentally attack into Phyrexian Obliterator. You see, so if we get rid of their little stuff, then they're only going to have their big stuff to attack with, which is, still scary, but if we can cheat out the Obliterator, then that is a pretty sweet combo there, just making them attack with their big creature instead of their little creatures. Finally, we got 1 copy of Fog to just, help prevent any damage from any, surprise decks we come across that are going to have, maybe go wide with a bunch of tokens or something like that, or some unblockable creature, perhaps, then we have Fog to deal with that. And so then we go into the lands. We have 4 copies of Verdant Catacombs. We have 3 copies of Bloodstained Mire, so we got the fetch lands that are going to help us get Overgrown Tomb, which is our swamp forest. Basically, we want to cast that elf and the Birds of Paradise turn 1. We really want to have those guys out turn 1. So these 7 fetch lands are going to help us get Overgrown Tomb, so we can turn 1 guaranteed to have a forest out. And so if you can tell here, most of our lands here are able to, either get a green mana or they generate green mana, right? So Overgrown Tomb, it's a swamp forest. You can shock it in by paying 2 life. If you don't, it enters tapped, and it taps for green or black. Blooming Marsh enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or fewer other lands, which is good in this deck again because exactly what we want it for is that turn 1 green mana, which is going to help us get the elf or the bird out. We got 1 copy of Cavern of Souls to help cast Phyrexian Obliterator and prevent it from being countered. And we have 4 swamps. Onto the sideboard, we have 2 Geth's Verdict, which is going to help us against the Boggle deck, mostly. Then we have 3 copies of Assassin's Trophy to just deal with any surprises our opponents might throw at us. We have 2 copies of Dryad Militant to help us deal with Storm decks. 4 copies of Dampening Spear to help against Storm and Tron. 2 copies of Guttural Response to help against, control decks that are going to try to counter our stuff. And finally, we got 2 copies of Sever the Bloodline, which are going to really help against tokens, right? Someone's coming at us wide. That's going to be bad for our deck. So, yeah, we want those to get rid of those nasty tokens. And that is it. That is Savage Obliteration for Modern. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you also love Phyrexian Obliterator like I do. He's pretty awesome. I don't know. And I love the idea of just cheating it out. Obviously the mana costs are a little bit tough, but I feel like we get around that. We only have 20 lands, but, we make up for it by having a lot of ramp. So if you have suggestions for this deck, please let me know, because this is going to be the deck I'm going to be, trying out at the tournament next for sure. So let me know what you think. If you like this video, hey, please like and subscribe. It really helps. Well, this is Eric from Bane Alley Magic signing off. Until next time, take care. Take it easy.